In this video, we're going to have a look at the property feature and how to record income and expenses against properties. First thing we need to do is enable the feature. So to do this, we click on your features, and this is where we can enable all the different features. So we just go down to properties, and it'll say enable the projects feature. So if we just do this, this is just enabling. It's like adding a third dimension to the product. So if we click on this, we have the option as well to enable a further level of detail where we can specify individual tasks and manage information at that level. But for now, we'll just leave this turned off. Very important to click up in the settings. So the projects feature or the property feature, we can switch it into different modes. So if you want to record time and expenses against a project, you click up here, and this will change all the terminology in the system to refer to projects. You can also change the terminology to refer to jobs, but in this particular example, we'll stick with properties. So we'll now record our income and expenses against properties. We don't need to worry about these two fields. This is more for professional services, which is the other mode. And this is where we can do work in progress billing and so on, so we can ignore those two. If you've got a lot of properties, then you can switch on auto numbering, and where it'll assign a unique number to each property. But in this particular example, we won't bother doing that. We'll just leave it switched off. Now that we've got it enabled, we click on save. And we can now see a list of properties up here. So when we set properties up, it'll always come with a default record, default project, and it's always a good idea to rename that to overheads. So you will have costs in your businesses that relate to individual properties, but you may have other costs that don't relate to a property, for example, accounting fees. In this example, we've just got two little properties. So we have the person who we're going to bill, and we have the address of the property. Okay, so we have three entries. So if we now click on the dashboard and we now click on invoice, we can now select a property. So aren't we? It automatically puts in the person who needs to be billed, and it'll use their address. We can now just say monthly rental. If you haven't got VAT enabled, this won't appear. In this particular case, we're just going to say we're going to bill £1,000, and it'll put in your terms and conditions, and you can also generate repeating entries. So instead of creating an invoice each month, we can actually say it's monthly. Okay, so we now just click on save. And before we do that, just note that the status of the invoice is draft. Okay, so we now click back on the dashboard, and we can see this is the net value of those invoices. So if we now click on an invoice, and we can just finalize it. And we click on back. You'll note that there's a little filter at the top of the screen, so we can now look at all of the overhead. All the costs and invoices allocated to overheads, and we can also go in and look at individual properties, and we can automatically get a P&L as well for each property. Okay, it'll only show finalized invoices. So a really important step when you're invoicing is, even though it creates the invoice, you still have to go in. It'll have draft status, and you've got to finalize it. So let's look at expenses. When we now go to add an expense, let's just do insurance. That's a good example. And once again, it depends on how you configured the VAT as to whether this appears. But I'm going to now select a property, and I'm going to say I spent £900 on insurance. And you can attach the receipt. So I'm going to click on save. If I've forgotten to attach the bill, it'll prompt me, but in this case I'll just say no. So I've now recorded an expense against the property, and I click back. I can now see my expenses building up, and if I filter on Arnsby, I'll only see the information, the income for Arnsby. I'll only see the expenses, and I can have a look at a quick P&L, and you can see it's all starting to build up. So to summarize, it's very easy. All you've got to do is go in and enable this feature, switch it into property mode, add your properties. Once you add an invoice and expense, you can allocate it to an individual property, and behind the scenes all of the accounting is taking place. And it's as simple as that.